All right, here we are. Good morning and welcome back. We're going to be watching the completion of the team event that you saw the Swiss rounds from yesterday. To recap, if you weren't with us, we had 92 teams competing yesterday in a 10K event. They played 7 rounds of Swiss, Legacy, Modern, and Sealed in the 3 seats. Then after they were done last night, the limited players drafted, and this morning we are going to see the top 8 rounds play out, Legacy, Modern, and Draft now between the players that made it for day 2. I'm going to be joined by Shane Downey, so let's go ahead and bring him in.
Morning,
hey Joe,
Shane.
bright and early here on the West Coast, but
bright
and early here on the West Coast, dig into this top 8.
I mean, it's early here too, but you're up at dawn, basically. You're up at dawn. Let's go ahead and put up the price board so you can see what the players are playing for. Again, we are in the top playing for. Again, we are in the top 8 now of the team event. So you can see the prize distribution there. In addition to the cash prizes, the players earn NRG series points, which are irrelevant for the top finishing team because those 3 players are going to qualify, as you can see, for our yearly championship. So they're not going to count their points, but everyone else is going to be trying to qualify on slots. That's point-based, and that'll be the championship will be played out in January. But for today, we're going to be running out the top 8 rounds, and then once that's over with in a few hours, we're going to pick up the coverage of our Modern 5K, which starts in an hour. So we'll probably pick that up in round 3 maybe. But yeah, let's go ahead and see these teams that you saw on camera yesterday compete. So we have our match for the title to go. So we have our match limited so we're going to see how some of these players drafted last night. Players drafted last Piper night. Powell against watching Dubin. Piper Powell against Zach down Dubin. To the match when we're ready to go. We're just going to jump right in here today. Match when we're ready to go. We're just going to jump right in here today. We're not going to be in probably any other limited format. This is the kind of card that,
appearing on the limited battlefield.
Right, so Bleed Red takes down the Halana and Elena. So its 2 counters will stay, the Snarling Wolf, but it will not be building up any more cards, but still. Piper Powell certainly has a bit of an advantage here. That's the Lacerated Flesh taking down the Cemetery Illuminator, and all the action continuing for Piper Powell's side as a big attack here for 5. Looks like it comes to. The life totals aren't updating yet. Perhaps we can get that running. And Zach Dubin fighting an uphill battle here to start.
Lacerated Flesh, certainly not one of the better red removal spells, but it gets the job done here.
Right. Now, Zach Dubin with an exploit deck, there's kind of a key element of exploit is that you have to have creatures on the board in order to sacrifice, and Zach Dubin just having trouble establishing a presence here. And here we see a checklist card. That is the Farmer, I believe, the 2/2 lifelink.
Yeah, and here with no other cards on the board, the best case scenario is trading with the Disciple. I don't know if Piper's going to do that trade. Obviously, you want to play any humans beforehand. Now we're going to crack a blood, try to find a creature. So this was about the best case scenario for Piper's deck. Looking at it, it is very aggressive. Mm-hmm. One thing that I found interesting looking at the deck list was there were a number of pump spells that are on the sidelines. Something like Massive Might, which is +2/+2 and Trample. Mm-hmm. There was a couple Witch's Webs, which is +3/+3. And I know you and I have talked a lot about in limited pump spells in general. The value of them definitely up and down depending on the format. But in this format, I think they're particularly good just because a lot of the removal is sorcery speed. And it was interesting to me that in a deck that does look aggressive, you can see her coming out of the gates here quite fast. She decided not to play those cards, whereas she is playing a couple of the green equip that is +3/+3, but that one's certainly a little slower.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Spiked Ripsaw. Yeah, 2 copies in Piper's deck, and that is a very powerful card, but it's slower, obviously, and not instant speed. And yeah, I'm a fan of pump spells a lot in limited formats and aggressive decks, and we see the attack here with just a Snarling Wolf trading.
Yeah, and Zach has no choice but just to chump block, gain a couple life. You can see I mentioned I was interested to see if Piper would offer the trade with the Disciple. Declines to do that. May be flooding out a little bit here. So if Zach can survive a couple more turns, he does have a very powerful deck. And you see a 2/5 blocker and drawing a card. So that might be step 1. And it looks like maybe another land drawn. We see the Death Touch now the choice is... So that's going to trade there. And taking 5, Zach declines to block the wolf and decides to trade. And so the Scorpion that I think was lurking in the hand prior to that turn certainly found a good use for it.
Yeah, and then 5 damage goes through. I mean, Zach Dubin really doesn't have a choice here. He's got to trade off creatures. He's got to get something off the board. But this is looking rough. I mean, a removal spell on this little 1-drop that is, in for 5 a turn would be something. But
okay, and this is going to look at some cards.
Mm-hmm. So this is
try to find something special.
The Guy's Blessing Impulse card, I believe. And
so you can choose to shuffle, I believe, up to 4 cards from your graveyard, maybe 3. And then you're going to
either player's graveyard.
4,
right,
and select a card from there. But if that's the start to your turn and you're at 2 life facing down 2 creatures, I know one of them isn't lethal, but Zach's in a bit of trouble here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this so I believe it's either play. You can shuffle either player's cards into their deck, and then you can look at top 4 cards and take one with you. So this is. I wonder if the judges be consulted as to the timing, because if I'm going to shuffle cards in, do I shuffle in first and then and then look at Thor and take a card, which is the correct way to resolve it, but maybe that is the question, or maybe there's something else going on. We'll see if how this is resolved, and if they don't get this
in the action.
Yeah, if they don't get this answered quickly, maybe we'll jump to another match. But this game is towards its conclusion. It looks like Piper Powell may be going to take it down. So we'll just see if this gets finished up or not.
So I know the Helena and Elena was only on the battlefield very briefly, but its impact on the game has been tremendous because those two counters have been super relevant.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this Snarling Wolf is, normally a 1-1 that pumps to a 3-3. Now a 3-3 that pumps to a 5-5. That's serious business. So perhaps the question was, do I still have to shuffle if I don't put any cards from my graveyard back in my deck? Because that did appear to be what happened. Zach Dubin, either way, did shuffle and then looked at 4, took 1.
It's interesting because he has some quality cards in his graveyard, but he must be looking for something specific here to try to get him out of this situation, and it's really got to be an answer to this wolf.
Okay, and we do see the zombie.
Fast.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so Chill to the Grave.
Right there. Yeah, it was Chill to the Grave. The tap a creature, draw a card as Zach to 1, and needs multiple answers here. As the Scorpion is now lethal on its own, can he find a way out? That is the Rule of Thraben, I believe, which is a 3-2 for 3 that has a death trigger. If any of your zombies die, you can look at the top of your deck, and if it's a zombie, you can add it to your hand.
So Zach is staying alive here at 1, and we see a number of lands still in Piper's hand and just pass back. So,
because the Chill to the Grave does lock the creature down for an additional turn, yeah. So the Scorpion can't attack. The Scorpion chooses not to attack, I guess not wanting to trade and then trigger and potentially give Zach a replacement card. But yeah, Piper doesn't have a lot to push through. It's not going to take much.
Yeah, and this is what I was afraid of a few turns ago, that this could potentially happen if Zach could stay alive for a few more turns. I know he's only at 1 life, but the card quality in his deck, looking at things beforehand, Piper's was certainly aggressive, but the card quality in Zach's deck, I think, was a little better. And this might be just, if you're coming to this stream as a strictly constructed player, well, you've probably played the control versus aggro matchup, and this is what happens sometimes. You may get the opponent down to 1 life, but once their card quality is better in the late game, you don't have a huge opportunity to actually take it down.
So we saw Repository Scob there come down and exploit the Archghoul of Thraben. So the Thraben triggers for its mechanic. Zach looked at the top card of his deck. It was not a zombie. It was a land. He chose to put it in the graveyard. And then the Repository Scob returned with its coming to play effect. If you exploit, returned a spell from graveyard to hand. I believe Bleed Dry was picked up.
Yeah.
So now that's going to lock the board up for a turn.
Bleed Dry, one of the premier commons in this set.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe the number 1 overall.
Dormant Grove. 4 mana up to protect here for Zach.
Dormant Grove.
We see Dormant Grove. That's going to grow the Scorpion, and the Wolf is going to be blood dry there.
Yeah. So Zach, looking like he has managed to stabilize. This Dormant Grove, in addition to pumping creatures, will eventually, or can eventually, turn into a 3/6 attacker on its own, but that requires a 6 toughness creature, and that Scorpion is a ways away from making that happen.
Yeah, so I recently heard someone say that Dormant Grove was the best uncommon in the set. I don't know if I quite subscribe to that theory, but it is quite powerful on the right board. But when you don't have a lot of creatures to throw these counters around, and you really only have 1 option right now, looks like Piper may have drawn a creature. But I think its power level goes down significantly when you only have 1 creature on the board versus a wide board where you can really play around with the counters and get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. The Dormant Grove does combo extremely well with the Cloaked Cadet that is also on Piper's deck, but we haven't seen that yet. And let's see, what do we have here?
I believe that's a belligerent guest on the board for Piper, and now a Thirst of Discovery.
Okay. All right, so the draw 3, pitch, I believe 2 spells, 2 cards, or a land. Is that right, on the Thirst spell?
Yeah, I'm going to date myself, but I know you're familiar with the card Compulsive Research. This is just an instant speed Compulsive Research.
Right.
That is obviously an improvement.
Yeah, it is not a strict improvement, though, because you have to start a basic land now as opposed to any land. But yeah, it is probably
true.
better.
In limited, you're not going to be playing too many non-basics, though.
Oh, and here, Zach Dobbins is actually going to be able to get himself off of 1 life, which is a little comforting as Diagraph Scavenger comes into play. You can eat a creature in your graveyard and drain your opponent for 2. So a little bit of breathing room, perhaps.
Yeah, that's got to make him feel a little better. I know the early days of me playing this set on Arena, there was a game where I wasn't paying attention to my life total at all, and they played 2 of those over consecutive turns, and all of a sudden I was dead, and I didn't even understand what happened.
Yeah, well,
because the board wasn't locked up. There was no combat that happened, and then apparently I was at 4. And sometimes on Arena you might not be paying as close attention to your life total as you do in real life.
Yeah, and it's actually particularly relevant here because Piper does have a Chandra Dress to Kill in her deck, which pings the opponent for 1. So Zach was dead to that for the last couple of turns.
Yeah, that's very true, and I'm sure Piper was hoping to draw it over the last couple turns, but
yeah,
gaining that 2 life could be super relevant. And now you have a situation where there's Death Touch creatures on both sides of the board, so even if you grow this Scorpion kind of out of control, Zach still has the option just to trade.
Right. So now, yeah, for the first time, Piper actually has a choice in the Dormant Grove as there's now multiple creatures in play. Who gets pumped? Do you try and get, I mean, the Scorpion is closer to 6 toughness by 1 than the Belligerent Guest, so trying to activate the Dormant Grove as soon as possible, the counter would probably go on the Scorpion, but that may not be what she chooses to do. Interesting here, we talked about the choice of playing Spiked Ripsaw instead of the other pump spell, which gives trample,
and which is web.
Trample on Death Touch would likely just end the game on the spot, but that is not an option based on the deck building choices the Piper has made.
Yeah, so Dawnhart Disciple comes down pre-combat to get the Dormant Grove to counter.
Yeah, so Zach Dubin has definitely recovered, but Piper Powell is not out of this game by any means. Might even still be ahead, just unable to push through the last damage as of yet. Is that Undead Butler coming down into play?
Yeah, so that's a 1/2. It's going to mill 3 cards, and then if it dies, it gets to raise dead a creature from the graveyard. And I believe we have a Cemetery Illuminator from the early stages of the game. So there's definitely at least one high-quality target should that Butler end up doing that.
Yeah, and Skullscop.
And now we have an exploit.
Yeah, Skullscop is going to trigger right away, sacrifice the Undead Butler. The Butler will recur a creature, and the Skullscop will generate a zombie token for exploiting anything, including that creature. Now, I'm not sure which creatures are actually left, because I believe the Skywing Scob did delete a couple creatures from Zach's graveyard in the early game in order to cantrip. So all of the creatures that died this game are not in the graveyard, but we don't have a good eye on it, so we can't exactly tell what is remaining in there or not.
It looked like we picked up the Archmage Thraben, which, with a number of zombies in play, certainly pretty strong.
So Wretched Throng was cast there, and then is now being sacrificed and finding one of its brethren inside the deck. Wretched Throng, a 2-mana 2/1 that when it dies, you can search your deck for another copy of it if you have one and put that in your hand. And there are 3 in Zach's deck, which obviously works well with some of the exploit mechanics.
And now all the wheels are churning here.
Yeah, Zach Dubin's board is growing in, and Piper Powell's board is growing in size as this Dormant Grove continues to put counters out there. Perusing the opponent's graveyard, seeing what is left, having had access to the deck list this morning, the players might actually be aware of what the opponent's deck is capable of. and so seeing what resources are gone, what has been expended, and what's left over. Piper has holding a lot of land, and we have a mechanic in this set in order to kind of alleviate that difficulty later in games, but Piper not flowing in blood right now.
This is some of the best sequences I've seen from a zombies type deck here in this limited format. Blue-black for me has been a little underwhelming, but you can really see it firing on all cylinders here for Zach. It took him a little while to get to this point. Wretched Throne is a card that I haven't been overly impressed with, but he does have 3 in his deck, and obviously the value goes up the more you have. And what's interesting is not many people draft in pod anymore. This was an 8-person draft. True. Playing against players in your pod. And Wretched Throng is a card that if I was drafting in pod, I would be more inclined, if say there's 5 or 6 cards left in the pack and there's nothing that I'm particularly interested in, I'm actually more inclined in a pod draft to hate draft, if you will, a Wretched Throng. But you can see that Zach managed to get 3 in his deck and putting them to good use.
Yeah, and it's also a point where you might take it earlier because if 2 people are drafting Wretched Throngs, no one's gonna get any advantage out of having them. But if you snag them all, then if you get all that were open in the 24 packs, then in this case maybe the 3 that are in Zach Dubin's deck, then you actually have some strength there. And we did see, I believe Piper has drawn one of her spiked Ripsaw equipments. And there is a trample creature in play and a death touch creature in play. So depending on how she wants to execute this, and the Ripsaw actually can to a creature at the cost of a forest. So spiked Ripsaw on the Scorpion would be lethal by itself, as it would be, well, maybe not quite, but 6 damage, potentially 7 if Firmament Grove puts another counter on it. With Trample will require 6 or 7 different blockers because of the way Death Touch and Trample work together.
That's true. And with the Ripsaw, she might be able to find a way to close this one.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. But
yeah, she's thinking hard about it. I certainly don't blame her here.
The big card, Zach Dubin's best card that has not been drawn thus far, and maybe overall, is probably Overcharged Amalgam, which is a 4-mana 3/3 flyer with Exploit and Flash to serve as a counter spell or a trigger, which could take down anything that Piper might end up having. We appear to be,
and it's interesting. Piper knows about a couple of the cards. You can see them being played face up here. And clearly those weren't deployed with mana available. So Zach has mana available. We know he has a second Bleed Draw in his deck, and he also has the Overcharged Amalgam. So he certainly has things to do with 4 mana, and there we see it.
Yeah, and there was Piper Powell optimistically playing the Spiked Ripsaw, and it does get countered by the Overcharged Amalgam, which exploits and generates another zombie. And now Piper looks like to have a hand full of land and still has a Storm Grove cranking away. But Zach Dubin's board is now, not only there's a flyer to start attacking, to start chipping away at the life total, and a pile of blockers on the board. So Piper is going to be drawing thinner and thinner as this goes along.
So one thing of note, how do you feel about Piper continuing to hold multiple lands?
I mean, I'm fine with holding 1 or 2, but I think there's 4 in hand right now, and I'm not sure that we're accomplishing a whole lot.
I think at some point Zach is able to sniff this out and recognize that there really isn't any action in Piper's hand. And you mentioned something like the Sack of Forest ability. There is going to occasionally be reasons you're going to want more lands in play. And right now, we can see Zach, he's really, life totals aside, he's really running away with this one on the board. Now, we do know there's a second Ripsaw in Piper's deck, and we know if that would have resolved, that may have been trouble for Zach, but we'll see if that comes up again.
Yeah, so we see here the second Arch Ghoul of Thraben come into play for Zach, and then Stitched Assistant comes into play, which is another exploit creature, which allows a scry and a draw, as well as, because of the Skull Scob, another zombie token. And then now there's perhaps another question as to, okay, the question here I believe is going to be, I'm exploiting Wretched Throng. Do I tutor a fresh one out of my deck before resolving the rest of the triggers?
Yeah, there is triggers galore on this deck right now.
There. So yeah, so this is what the question is being, and what's going to be the result of this is because it's the cost, and then it goes to the graveyard. The Wretched Throng trigger is going to resolve first, I believe, but we'll see how things are implemented. All right, it looks like we're switching tables while that's being resolved. I don't really feel like that's going to be resolved quickly. I think we can go back, but I know our producer's trying to keep the action fluid here.
And we can see.
Yeah, there we go.
The viewers at home may have noticed, but I'm just noticing for the first time that we already have a match completed.
Yeah.
In this team top 8 with Adam Wasburn-Moses defeating Warfield in the legacy seat in a land versus silver match.
Yeah, and that's not a shocking result really. The lands deck with always been good at dealing with creatures, Maze of Ith type things, deal with Murktide region just fine, and ignoring the size. We now see here we're taking a look at the modern match where Kyle Reichard is up a game against Kayla Davison. So the limited is still in 1. We'll see how that plays out if they actually get that trigger sequence resolved. In the meantime, the 4-color Yorion deck down the game to Izzet Murktide with a Teferi on the board, and Kayla in the midst of her turn here. Let's see what she's got for us.
Yeah, so we can see that this game has certainly been going on for a while based on the graveyards, especially on Kayla's side. It looks like Kyle may have missed some land drops, but with this Izzet Murktide deck, you're not too worried about that. 4 lands is plenty, but it looks like his hand count, it's face down there, so it could be multiple cards, but if it's just 1 or 2 cards, Kayla may be able to, maybe in full control here, especially after resolving that Omnath.
Right, so probably has land drop to go here. The Hallowed Fountain, and shocking it in here, she'll net 2 life, and then put Yorion in her hand. She had the option of leaving Dovin's Veto mana available. Instead, chooses to pick up the Yorion. Nothing wrong with that. And there is a Solitude in hand, so this Dragon Rage shall be picked off if she chooses.
And poor Kyle, he has that 1 blue mana up and would have been able to Mystical Dispute that Omnath if not for the Teferi on the board. So that Mystical Dispute is just rotting in hand. And
yeah, that's Kayla, a tough one. I mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, so we're moving back to limited here. But yeah, Mystical Dispute against Teferi. I mean, any counter against Teferi, if you draw it afterwards, it's just miserable. So it looks like we are now finally resolving this same. So we didn't actually miss any action. Okay, so all the triggers are now resolving simultaneously with these. Yeah, all triggers going in the stack all at the same time. The active player gets to choose the stacking. So we have the Arch being the Arch Ghoul. The Arch Ghoul of Thraben and the Stitch Assistant trigger. So we scry 1, draw 1, and surveil 1 if we draw it on the stack in the order of Zach's choice. I don't believe there's likely no relevance to which way he chooses to do that, as neither one will allow a card to remain on top. But at the end of all that, another zombie token is created, and Piper takes 3 damage in the air.
Yeah, not only do you get the zombie token, you get to draw a card, you get to essentially draw another card because you're getting the 2/1 zombie, the 3rd one in your deck, put into your hand. So just a tremendous amount of value from Zach on his turn. Meanwhile, for Piper, just continues to draw lands and really is in some trouble here.
Mm-hmm. From one of our other matches, the local hero team of Ricky Tovar, Peter Tragos, and Tommy Tomsevich does in fact lose to the team of Palercio, Zanuto, and Bedell in one of the other top 8 matches going on right now.
So we see Apprentice Sharpshooter hit the battlefield, and now it's going to get a counter. I mean, we did have a flying attacker getting in there, so we might continue to...
It tried to get a counter. The Dormant Grove attempted to put a counter on the Sharpshooter, but Blue Dry took it down instead. quality removal spell being used on a 1/4, but it wasn't going to stay 1/4 like you were saying. Norman Grove is going to grow it, and Zach Dubin wants to be able to continue to attack. And he's going to flood the board with stuff. We see Blood Fountain and the last Wretched Throng, I believe. There can't be too many cards left in his deck at this point.
That's very true. A little bit off screen, and now we have a Blood Fountain, just everything working for Zach here. And this is exactly how this matchup I anticipated would play out based on looking at the deck list. Piper's deck certainly much more aggressive, but I thought the card quality in Zach's deck, and you can see all the synergies working together here in the late game, and Piper has been unable to cross that finish line.
Yeah, Zach Dubin now just counting up creatures on the board, trying to figure out if he can swing in with everything at the win. It's not something you want to be wrong about. And he's now, he's going to line up his suspected blocks and see how much damage is actually going to get through. And looks like he's definitely attacking with the flyer, the overcharged amalgam.
So Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but these players, did they have access to each other's deck list before this match started?
They did. They had access to the deck list right as they were going to start, as they sat down. They did not. The draft was last night, but they were not allowed to see the opponent's deck list until this morning when they sat down to play. So they had time to study them, but not to proxy them up and practice against them.
So one thing that's interesting here, as Zach is trying to figure out this combat and what could go wrong, he does have to be conscious of that second spiked ribsaw, especially if the Death Touch creature survives combat, and I imagine it will. So that does complicate matters if he's trying to figure out exactly what he can survive and what he can attack with.
Yeah, at this point, so just the flyer came in. Blood Fountain was then sacrificed for 4 mana to recur 2 creatures from the graveyard, and we saw the Skywing Scob return to play for the second time in the game, adding a second flyer to increase haste of the attack against Piper potentially. And you're right, the spiked ripsaw, I don't even know if it's enough at this point, but it would clear out.
I'm not sure it is, but I think Zach would be taking a risk should he click the attack all button, if you will.
Right. So Piper down to 9. We're now at a 2-turn clock in the air as there are 5 power worth of flyers between the overcharged amalgam and the the flying Skywing Scob, I believe is the name of the card.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, it's hard to tell based on the deck being off screen, but I think Skywing Scob chose not to draw a card when I assume there is still creatures left in the graveyard, but again, it's hard to tell. But we are cracking a blood here, so clearly deck size must not be a huge concern. But now we see another removal spell drawn, and now taking out the Scorpion really, I think, seals the deal on Zach taking down this game. It might take a few turns. The Scorpion, the Ripsaw is not very scary, and now we're just getting in there.
Yeah, Grizzly Ritual takes down the Scorpion, and then that is the end of the game. It's clear to me now, Shane, that you're seeing.
So I am watching on a delay. I do apologize to the viewers if it's not quite making sense. But if we can get me up on our side, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get that straightened out at some point. But in the meantime, we switch over to Modern here as Zach Dubin does win game 1 against Piper Powell. If Zach Dubin or Kayla Davison is able to take down their match, the team of Dubin, Davison, and Wasburn-Moses would win. But Kyle Reichard might have something to say about that. He's up again against Kayla Davison, although game 2 is looking a little rough. She does have Solitude, Yon, Ren 6, and Omnath versus a Ragavan, which is a super great card on turn 1, but not so much on turn 10.
Yeah, this is another situation where it might take a few turns, and Kayla might be at a lower life total. I know every once in a while, somebody who's not familiar with Magic might be watching a stream for the first time and see the life totals and assume that whoever has the higher life total is obviously the one winning. But we can clearly see in both the limited matchup that we just watched in this game right now between Kayla and Kyle, that Kayla is firmly in control and isn't at a ton of risk. Now, being at 6 life against a deck with lightning bolts, obviously there is some concern there. But as we see expressive iteration cast, maybe we're going to be looking for some lightning bolts here.
All right,
but
so
ultimately Kayla in control.
All right, so Shane, we're going to go ahead. We need you to, I believe, go to watch the. We need to watch you watch the output of inside the Skype channel as opposed to watching on Twitch or Melee, and I believe that will overcome the lag issues that you're facing.
I just switched over. We're good.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So, I was paying attention to that production issue for a second, but yeah, we are looking like Omnath and Buddies are just going to overwhelm Kyle Reichard here. And expressive iteration is great and everything, but yeah, Kyle says, you know what? Expressive iteration, I don't care what I get out of this, it's not going to be enough. Kayla Davison wins that game. And
so essentially right now, either one of Kayla or Zach for them just needs to win a game and for them to advance. I think you got to feel really good if you're on that team. Obviously, the Lance player on that team. Obviously, the Lance player did their job and is feeling really good. Got that one over early, and it's the number 1 seed also. So it's worth pointing out that they only had to play in one of these matchups, but certainly looking good right now.
Yeah, definitely. And this is where, so if you're the player, you're legacy player, you're done. Your job is over, like you said. Now, do you sit over one of your neighbor's shoulders and try and point out everything, or you just we had yesterday in the Winnenden match where the team of Tomsevich, Tovar, and Tragos was playing Tomsevich was playing for the match, and Tovar, the Seal Deck player, decided he couldn't handle the stress of watching and just walked to the other side of the room and just let things play out as they were. It was like, I'm not going to be of any help to you. Sitting here stressing me out, I'm just going to get out of the way.
That makes perfect sense to me. Sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and especially if you're watching over a match that is a format that you're not particularly familiar with, you can certainly sometimes cause more harm than good when trying to help out a teammate.
Yeah, definitely. So while both arena matches are in sideboarding right now, we're going to go ahead and recap what we're doing today. We are playing the top 8 of our Team 10K, which began yesterday with 7 rounds of Swiss. We're in the top 8 right now. There you can see the bracket. So let's go ahead and talk through this until the matches are ready to go. Excuse me. We're in the middle of watching on the top left of your screen the Powell, Reichard, Warfield match versus Wasburn-Moses, Davison, Dubin. Palacio, on the bottom left, Palacio, Zanudo, and Bedell defeated Tovar, Tragos, and Tomsevich. Production, give me that to me one more time. The team of Matt Hoey, Will Kruger, and Joseph Bernal, another one of the powerhouse teams that entered the field, defeated Zakchevsky, Stalsberg, and Gascoigne. So we have the 2 matches still playing, Middlestein, Collins, and Bastian versus Franson, Wilbers, and Tilson still playing. But we have our camera match. Once we have a game in action, we'll get back down to the match. Additionally, when the top 8 is finished playing out in a couple hours, we will switch over to the Modern 5K, which is just getting ready to kick off. There's a pretty close to a full house here today. It's actually going to be 9 rounds of Swiss in the Modern event, which means the players that are taking down this event, the finalists are going to be playing 12 rounds today, which is a heavy commitment of time and effort, but hopefully 5K is worth the investment. So let's go ahead and go back down to the table. It looks like the limited players are shuffling up and getting ready for game 2. Shane, you called it. You said, I think this blue-black deck might start out, have a little bit of a hard time keeping up at the beginning, but might be able to pull it out, and that's exactly what happened.
And they have a number of 2 and 3 drops creatures to potentially trade early. We just didn't see it in that game. So I'm not even sure that the rest of this games in this match might not necessarily play out the same way. Piper was able to gain that huge advantage. Wolf going to a 3-3 and potentially pump into a 5-5. And if Zach has a little more interaction in the early games, I don't even think we'll necessarily see him get to the dicey situation. If you remember it was probably turn 6, I want to say, when he was chump blocking with a 2/2 lifelink just to survive.
Yeah.
But things definitely turned a corner. Now, from Piper's vantage point, I'm sure that she's disappointed to continue to draw lands for so many turns. We did point out that she does have Chandra Dress to Kill in her deck, and Zach was at 1 life for about 2 or 3 turns before he was able to get out of range. So Piper certainly had some draw steps that could have gone more favorable for her, but ultimately Zach's deck was able to overpower her in the end.
Yeah. But I mean, certainly she should still be hopeful. I mean, she had, for example, like Zach, you're talking about Zach Dubin. If he had some more early interaction, early blockers, he might have ended up in a safer position. If he didn't have one of his 2 copies of Bleed Dry, the Hana and Elena might have just run him over. So
that's incredibly correct. Halana and Elena left on the battlefield for more than 1 turn just generates so much value, and really it's really difficult for any removal spell at that point to be enough because you've grown the creatures around her. Now we do see Chandra in Piper Powell's hand that may come down on turn 3. And Wretched Throng might have something to say about that. Chandra not the best at being defensive. It does deal 1 damage, but only 1 damage to a player or planeswalker. It's not something as powerful like Wrenn and 6 that can come down and ping a creature as well.
Right. Yeah. Chandra is not a super card. Like maybe fine in a board stall where you can take advantage of the red version of card draw over time. But you see here Piper even maybe consulting Kyle sitting next to her, or perhaps Allie has moved over. But is this even worth casting right now? Seems to be the question. It does generate mana, but okay. Second Force comes down, and we're going to see the belligerent guest 3/2 trample when it connects with the opponent. Created blood, and
this is aggressive. We may be looking for a 3rd land here with this Chill of the Grave, and it looks like we may have missed.
Okay, well, certainly aggressive, but also exactly what Zach Dubin needs to do because you don't want to be missing land drops. Now, this Chill of the Grave will leave the belligerent guest tapped for a turn, so no blood tokens coming as of yet.
And Zach did mulligan, so he is stumbling here a little bit coming out of the gates.
Just a brief look at the other remaining top 8 match. The team of Middlestein, Collins, and Boston does defeat Franson, Wilbers, and Tilson. So this is the only top 8 match remaining. Powell, Reichard, and Warfield trying to defeat Dubin, Davison, and Wasburn-Moses. The Archghoul of Thraben comes down to join the Wretched Throng, and Wretched Throng, while not an impressive card on its own, is able to summon his buddies if he trades off and also benefit from the Archghoul's ability. Now, what do we have? Piper. And Piper has, well, that is a pretty good presence on the board.
So Flourishing Hunter.
Yeah.
A 6 mana 6/6 that gains life equal to the highest toughness you have of other creatures on the board. So Piper, the life, 2 life is nice, but not exactly what, not crucial here. But either way, a 6/6 blocker, you have a planeswalker. This is a terrific start, and you can see the mana generation from Chandra. When I first looked at that card, I didn't think the mana generation was going to be all that important, especially in limited. But you can see here, jumping from 5 to 6 and getting the Flourishing Hunter on the board and allowing a huge blocker that's in the way here to protect the Chandra is just tremendous for Piper.
Yeah, on the other side, Zach Dubin kind of going off here a little bit. We have the Mind Cap Ghoul or something to that Mind Leech Ghoul comes into play, exploits the Wretched Throng with the Archghoul in play. So what happens here, the net is Piper has to exile a card from her hand. It was a mountain that got thrown away. Zach Dubin gets a replacement Wretched Throng, and he also got the ability from the Archghoul, which netted, I believe, that is the Undead Butler in hand. So 3 cards generated that turn from Zach Dubin at the cost of basically nothing.
Yeah, so we see Trigger Soup again here from Zach, but he has a ton of synergy in his deck and really showing off here a little bit. But Piper off to a much better start. Well, I say off to a much better start. That's not true. She had a tremendous start in game 1, but this looks like a board that can maintain its presence whereas in game 1 she lost control a little bit.
So this is the spiked ripsaw coming into play here, and with the mana bonus, able to be equipped right away and attacking. Equipped to the belligerent suitor, which already has trample, so she doesn't need to sacrifice a forest to gain that. And crashing in here, leaving the 6/6 back on defense. Zach Dubin making a double block here, okay, but some trample damage still goes through, so Piper does net herself a blood token, which is useful because she does have an excess land in hand. Solid turns on both sides.
And Zach here with just the 3 lands. We know a couple of the cards that are face up there, but
there we go. 4th land.
Quite the battlefield presence for Piper that he's going to have to fight through. I do believe I see a bleed dry in his hand, so that can take down the hunter. Now, if Piper goes to equip, and obviously the bleed dry would take down the hunter, that'd be a nice swing in Zach's favor.
Definitely.
But still, this Chandra, I mean, there's going to be a situation where we could potentially get to Chandra in ultimate range because it's not being pressured at all right now.
Right. Maybe we can bring Chandra Just to Kill up on the screen for people who might be unfamiliar with all the text of the card. This new Planeswalker, 2 red and 1, and there have certainly been 3-mana Planeswalkers throughout Magic's history that were tremendous and some that were kind of just ordinary. You see here a 3 loyalty +1, which is I believe all we've seen so far. Add a red mana and ping the opponent. Also +1, do red's new version of card drawing, which is exile a card from your deck and then play it this turn if you want to. And then the ultimate for 7 loyalty, which Piper is getting somewhat closer to. Exile
okay, so Joe, the Flourishing Hunter just attacked, and I know there's a bleed dry in hand for Zach, and he just took the damage. So I'd have to imagine there's overcharged Amalgam in hand. We could be wrong, of course, but Piper is going to cast a spell, so let's see what happens here.
Interesting. Well, overcharged Amalgam with nothing to exploit at the moment wouldn't be a play you'd kind of be sitting on. So yeah, the bleed dry accepting the damage is interesting. And we have here...
we see it here. It's going to sack itself.
Okay. And then...
Okay, interesting. So I saw it killed...
Right. Wolf Strike, right. Okay.
I couldn't quite see the card. It may have been Crushing Canopy. That was in her sideboard, I believe.
Okay. I mean, that is possible. There are wolf strikes in the deck, and
so
there is
Crushing Canopy in the sideboard.
Play. So yeah,
that was a risky play from Zach, only because obviously he took 6 damage to do it, and then was ultimately just countering a 2-drop. And I feel like he would have been better served. Now he obviously, if Piper casts a better spell, maybe it turns out to be better for him. But I think he would have been better served to bleed dry the Flourishing Hunter last turn.
So the Flourishing Hunter goes down this turn, but the new wolf that dodged the counter on the way in gets in for 3 with the Ripsaw, and Piper Powell with the Pump of the Fist, and does even up this match.
Yeah, and Zach was really between a rock and a hard place. Once he missed that 3rd land drop after the Chill to the Grave, the writing may have been on the wall.
Yeah. That's definitely a rough way to start on a multi-unit land drops. Okay, so while those players are getting ready for Game 3, we'll jump over to the modern Game 3. Kayla Davison with an Eternal Witness on the board and a mana advantage. Looks like there are 2 treasures on Kyle Reichard's side of the board, so Ragavan must have gotten in for a little bit of damage. Kayla Davison with cards in hand.
So our reminder to the viewers at home, if Kayla wins this game, this match is over, and if at some point we go back to the limited, if Zach were to win, that team would win as well. But let's not count out Piper and Kyle here. They would each have to win their match for their team as a whole to get down.
And this is looking Kyle Reichard with nothing to add to the board, despite having plenty of cards himself. And given time, giving both decks additional turns, I'm more confident in the 4-color Yorian's deck's ability to pull up and put pressure than the Murktide Izzet deck, which has strong cards for late game, but really is punching his 1-drops, which are not going to be effective at this point. And we saw the Eternal Witness just sitting back, maybe saying, I'm willing to not attack in order to allow allow Ragavan Dash to get in.
Yeah, usually in the late stages of the games for this Izzet Murktide deck, you're relying a lot on Murktide Regent to cross the finish line, and these 4-color Yorion decks can cover Murktide Regent in so many ways. Obviously, Solitude being the biggest one.
All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the limited. That was what we started with this match. Let's go ahead and keep it going to see it through. Paxong Pup for Piper Powell versus the Archghoul. And what else is that? That is the Wretched Throng. So Wretched Throng versus Archghoul again. Nice combo.
This is a great start for Zach. And if you're Piper, you really want a Wolf here on turn 3 to be able to start pumping this Paxong Pup, excuse me. We see Belligerent Guest. So that's not going to get it done in just a passing of the turn. If you saw a Wolf there and the Pup growing to a 2/2, I would have been interested to see if she would have offered the trade with the Thraben. Probably not. But the start for Zach is quite good here. And now we see another aggressive Chill to the Grave.
Right. This one looking like it's wanting to force damage through, as there's not a good block here for Piper.
Well, it's used to force damage through, but I still think he was looking for a 4th land there.
Yeah, you're right.
And so we've seen that in back-to-back games, just a main phase Chill to the Grave to try and draw land, and that might be the stumble that Piper needs to continue add to the board and maintain this board state. So we see the Chandra Just to Kill once again. We see a spiked Ripsaw and a few lands, but we're going to start with a 4-drop. And Izzet Halana and Elena? It is, which is such a good card. Definitely the best card in Piper's deck. And
it's the best card in
Zach's point
maybe
of view,
any deck.
Oh, yes. Yeah, if you're red-green, that's probably the best card in the set you can ask for. And Paxong Pup getting some counters. This isn't the way we expected the Paxong Pup to get some counters.
That's true.
But nonetheless, it now is able to attack as a 2/3. And one thing that I doubt it's going to come up in this game, but Halana and Elena has a lot of text. We know these new modern cards, not modern as in the formats, but modern as in the sets, the most recent sets. They have a lot of text, and sometimes you things. And there has been some games where the reach of
bring up Halana and Elena if we get a chance
has come up.
Yeah, Zach Dubin playing Witness to Fear the Land probably, but if we can bring up Halana and Elena, yeah, you're saying this card has all kinds of abilities, and this is a card where if you randomly removed one of its abilities, it would still be playable.
Oh, absolutely. So we see the main phase Thirst for Discovery, definitely looking for the 4th land that was still missing. So not the best Thirst for Discovery for of all time, but definitely finding what it's looking for in that land. But discarding two cards is generally not what you want to be doing with the Thirst for Discovery.
Right. Okay, you're right. That was Thirst for Discovery, not Witness the Future. Halana and Elena partners, 2/3 for 4 mana. First strike, reach. Beginning of combat in your turn, put X+1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. In this case, it's 2. And that creature gains haste until end of turn. Those counters are not till the end of the turn. This is a permanent boost. And it looks like this turn it's going to the Belligerent Suitor. Trampler, now a 5/4 Trampler attacking on its own and going to be double blocked, which will generate card advantage for Zach. It will not find a land out of this, but it replaces him Wretched Throng, and I believe 2 triggers from the Archghoul.
Yeah, so we're going to get some what is pretty close to Surveil triggers here. Well, that even better than Surveil, because that one goes straight to hand, and then a card going to the graveyard. But probably wants to continue to hit land drops here to Zach. But what a board presence on the other side. This Halana and Elena isn't answered pretty much immediately. I anticipate Piper's going to run away with this game. And even if you get rid of the Halana and Elena, well, you have a Paxong, you have a Chandra, you have a Spike Ripsaw. I mean, Zach's in a lot of trouble. And he did have a good start. He had the 2-drop into the 3-drop and then stumbled on lands.
Okay, so here we have the Death Touch creature, the 2/3 Diagraph Scavenger. But in the meantime, and now with the Ripsaw, now Halana Elena generally is pumping 2 counters out of turn. With the Ripsaw on there, it'll be pumping out 5. Which
and that may have been why when I looked at Piper's deck list, She seemed to prioritize the Ripsaw over some of the pump spells, and this might be exactly why. Now, Ripsaw might be a better card, but in general, I tend to lean towards the pump spells. But you can see here, if you were to equip the Helana and Elena, this game would be just about over.
And it is. Zach Dubin with only one black mana available is not going to be able to respond this turn, and without being able to interrupt this how is he going to recover from this? This is going to add, 8 power onto the attackers who are currently on board. Now, the Digraph does have Death Touch, so maybe the Helana Elena doesn't attack this turn, or maybe Piper adds another creature, which gets...
I know we just had it on the screen, but it has First Strike, right?
Yeah, okay, you're right. You talked about potentially missing the First Strike. Yes, you're right, it does. So yeah, all kinds of abilities on this card, and Zach Dubin in for a beating. The Paxson Pup is going to grow to a it's +7 counters now, so it's an 8/8. Helana is a 5 power with the potential to have trample if Piper wants it. The one ability doesn't have.
What Piper's thinking about here is if she wants to potentially offer up the trade for the Paxson Pup. I don't think there's really any reason to.
Yeah. Okay, so Helana Elena gets in for 5. And Zach Dubin is looking for... I've never seen a Bleed Dry not be able to kill a creature in this format, but this Paxson Pup is growing fast. So we might actually...
That's fine. I don't think I have either. We see things like 113s in this format, but Bleed Dry still takes care of those.
All right, and we have
card. Let's see what we got.
The coverage-friendly checklist card, yeah.
Okay. Binding probably not going to get it done here.
Right.
We see Grizzly Salvage in hand, so there is a removal spell at the ready for the Helana and Elena, but of course we need the 6th land to get to that point.
Mind Leech School exploiting the Blinding Geist to take a card, again, land out of Piper's hand, and able to be cast from the graveyard in the future, but can Zach Dubin even get to
I'm a little surprised to see
the
exploit there. Okay, so Piper takes it down, and it looks like Kyle takes down. So that's it. That's it. Piper,
wow, yeah.
Kyle, and Allie. Allie's got to be feeling great right now. The best thing about team tournaments, and I'm curious to see what your favorite thing about team tournaments, but mine is when you lose and your team still wins. It's the best feeling in the world.
It's super cool.
Have I done a lot of that? Well, I'm not really going to say, but it has happened.
Yeah, that is fun. So, my favorite thing about team tournaments is probably that, on the off chance that you actually make a cool play, there's witnesses.
Yes.
That's always fun too. All right, so if we have the bracket, we can go and update you on where we're at right now. So what we just watched was the Powell, Reichard, and Warfield team defeat... Oh, actually, we have it updated now. That's a new thing for us. Defeating the Wasburn-Moses, Davison, Dubin team, and you can see the results of the other matches here. So, pretty interesting start to our top 8. We got a lot of limited in. We got to see a brief look in Modern. And we're going to step away for a moment to get the semifinals paired up, and we'll come back and we'll probably start with one of the other formats for the next round. But we'll be with you all day today, and I mean all day.